All right, welcome to another episode of the Credder Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Palmieri, and with me today is Bill Loundy. Bill is CEO and co-founder of Readup, which is an article-based social reading network. So as you might notice, readup.com and credder.com actually have a lot in common, but from very early on, Bill and I decided that we were going to have a supportive and collaborative relationship, which I'm happy to say has grown into a friendship over the last few years. So I'm excited to have Bill on today to discuss his company's mission, their recent push to monetize the platform with Readup subscriptions, and a wider conversation, of course, about online media today. So Bill, thanks for being here.
Yes, Chase, thank you for having me. You're one of my favorite people in this industry, this extremely small industry. But yeah, I have really valued our friendship and professional and personal connections over the course of the last few years. You're doing God's work. I know you know that. Hopefully you think I am too. We'll see.
Yes, we definitely are. We're doing it together. And it's been great to be able to support each other on what has really been, for both of us, a very typical founder, start with nothing, try to build it from there kind of story. And we're definitely going to get into that story. But before we dive into Readup, and even before we dive into kind of the founding story, tell us a little bit about your reading habits before Readup, because I know you're a very avid reader.
Totally. You know, people assume that automatically I'm some kind of like superhuman when it comes to reading. But just like everyone else, I have to do it. You know, it takes work. I have to remind myself that I need to do it. A friend of mine recently was like apologizing to me because it had been a few months since he'd read a novel, like as though I was like someone who just reads novels all the time. And I keep tabs on my reading, but it takes work. And so my current reading is obviously a lot of reading on Readup. Readup has completely changed my internet life because now I actually read online articles and stories. We'll talk about, you know, what happens when you're on Twitter and Facebook is a totally different thing from real reading. But yeah, and I also have, I read the local newspaper where I live here in northern New Mexico. The Taos News is a weekly newspaper. And then I also am subscribed to two publications, New Yorker Magazine, because I can't resist. I've been reading that for decades, and also Poetry Magazine. But yeah, reading and writing has been a really major part of my life. Unfortunately, like a lot of readers and writers and aspiring writers, it's a really hard way to make a living. So for me, I was an English major in college. I like lived with books and journals when I was a little kid. And then I've tried to kind of keep it in my life, but it's, you know, been up and down and left and right. And I just try to read as much as I can, basically.
Great. And let's get a little philosophical for a second here.
Totally.
Why is reading important? So for example, let's say you're talking to the young generation right now where they live on Twitch and YouTube and listen to books via audio rather than actually reading. And obviously that's a generalization. Every generation is kind of moving more and more towards audio and video content, just probably because it's an easier format to absorb. And there's also people who actually learn better through audio and video than they do through written content. And we know a lot of those people. So why is reading and kind of the written format important?
It's very good exercise for your brain. And there's nothing else that does that one particular exercise really well. So I'll start though by saying that an interesting dichotomy about reading is that it is an escape from reality. If life is stressful and crazy and you want to get away from it all, reading is an excellent way to do that. And scientists have studied this at the neurological level. It has a lot of the same benefits as going for a beautiful hike or going to a yoga class or meditating or just spending time with loved ones. You know, that's like a really important thing that we should all just for no other reason at all. Reading's just really, good for us, and it's enriching. And that's kind of like instinctual. People feel that and know that. But the other very exciting thing about reading is it helps you get into reality. So one of the things that's going on in the world right now is it's hard to know what's even going on sometimes. This is a strange topic to talk about because you and I are both technology and media executives. And so I don't know what your position is on this, but I have no problem admitting that it takes work, and sometimes I get lost. And just understanding what's going on in the world, especially right now, the world is so crazy. Reading is a good way to actually figure out what's real, what's going on, how can I stay informed on the most basic level, just to be a member of society and a part of your community, locally and globally. But yeah, reading is really, really important. And actually, I'm glad that you asked that question, by the way, because I have spoken, recently with it's a very personal conversation about whether or not, if you don't read, are you, a bad person or something like that. Or I've talked to teachers who are asking about students now, like they're genuinely curious if reading is something that's going to matter in 10, 20, 30 years. That question scares me a lot, that there's not this automatic understanding. I'm 33 years old. I think you're in my bracket or whatever. But yeah, when I was growing up, social media didn't actually, I know exactly when it started because I got Facebook with a Stanford email address when I was going to college in my senior year of high school, basically. Up until that point, this question of whether or not reading was good for you was not like that. No one was debating that, you wanted your kids to be readers. You wanted to sort of foster a love for reading. And that was just baked into existence itself. Now, that's now a conversation that we need to have. And I feel strongly about it, but I'm open to hearing all the, alternate perspectives. There are respected people out there who are saying that reading can die and that's okay. Like actually focusing on something for 15, 20, 30 minutes instead of just, I guess, ambient reading.
Yeah, I think convenience is sometimes a killer of previous technology. I think we're seeing things with just Uber as an example, as a comparable, where a lot of the younger generation aren't actually even getting driver's licenses anymore because they're getting driven around in Uber so much that they don't see the point in having a driver's license, and a lot of people don't see the point in owning a car and paying the additional cost of car insurance and gas and all these other things, and they just think, oh, this gets the job done. It gets me from A to B. And I think there's similar kind of things in the reading space where I can click play on an article and have the voiceover read the article to me. And I think some people think, well, that's the same thing as getting me from A to B. The information got into my head. What does it matter whether I read it or listened to it? And obviously, there's this value of passive content consumption nowadays where you can listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook while you're doing the dishes and the laundry and other things. And this kind of busy society, especially here in America, it makes sense to find those extra times to keep learning and growing. But I want to touch on where you first decided or realized that reading is broken, because that's something that you say right there at the top of your homepage on readup.com, that digital reading is broken. When was your first experience with that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure that I have a specific answer because it's basically been like a 5-year journey. But the initial spark that started Readup, I called my best friend, who's now my co-founder. He's a software developer and has been self-taught for his entire life. And I worked in Silicon Valley and was very interested in the internet. And we always called each other and talked about ideas, way to improve things. But on this one particular call went for hours long, basically. And I called him and was basically, I'm sure there was a lot of cursing involved, so I have to remind myself that this is a professional conversation, but was like, dude, the problem with the internet, it's very easy for, I had this moment of clarity or whatever, is everyone's talking about stuff they haven't read. Like people are literally not reading things and then weighing in on the comments. And whether it's happening in a Facebook thread or on Reddit or right there in the comment section underneath an article, it was astounding, and it just happened to me day after day after day. And then, so then we had this long phone call, and that's what basically started it all, like this idea, which was, oh my God, reading isn't really happening on the internet right now. There's something else that we're doing. And actually, that's a good segue to something you were talking about before. There's a difference between ambient, passive decoding of text. You read a stop sign, you read a menu at a restaurant. Not everyone, but we as a global civilization have done an incredible job to just create literacy as a baseline for humanity. And that's a good thing. That's also a new thing, by the way. So the world over, most people know how to read things, but there's something that's different about reading as a craft and reading long form articles and reading in a way that, when you read something that's more than 30 or 40 minutes, you have to remember things that happened earlier in the article or the book. If you're reading a novel, you need to connect to the characters and watch, the passage of the story go through. That's what's in peril right now. So when I'm like losing sleep at night, I'm not afraid that the next generation won't know how to read, but I'm afraid that we're losing an understanding of what this longer form, deeper reading is. And just like most of the most nefarious, evils that are like plaguing society right now, they're kind of hard to understand or even see at first because it's just so universal. Everyone's on the internet all day, every day. Everyone's staring at screens all day, every day. And the nightmare part of it is everyone kind of thinks that they're reading, thinks that they're like deeply engaging with each other when they're actually playing ad-sponsored corporate video games that are liking and sharing things on headlines only. So that's the thing that Readup is categorically against. And like I said, it was a lot, there were different things that clunked into place. We were obsessed with creating a community where civil discourse could actually exist. Now we actually legitimately solved the problem of the attention economy. We're building a future that's advertising free. Hopefully we can get into all of this, but I really think that what we're working on right now is the future of the internet. I'm certain that this is going to hit millions of people, and hopefully it can do for others what it did for me, my co-founder, and first it was like dozens of friends and family, and then hundreds of people, thousands of people we don't even know, literally all around the world, who are slowly waking up to this thing, which is like, holy crap, I haven't read an article online in months. And then when you actually read one, it's like, whoa, like that's what it feels like to sit and read an article. So that's what we're focused on right now.
Yeah, I think we're going to touch on two things you just talked about there. But before I jump into the technology, which is all about how you ensure that somebody has read the piece of content before they can comment, and we're going to get into that. But you talk about how there's these long form articles, these 30, 40-minute deep dive journalistic reports a lot of the times. And at the same time, we see a lot of news consumers who complain about clickbait, surface level, just kind of confrontational for no reason, short articles. And I think that the problem is that they know that there are these longer form articles, but they're so frustrated with what they see in these short 10-minute articles that they don't want to commit to that 30, 40-minute article because they have no idea, is this the best 30, 40-minute article? Is it worth my time? That's kind of the side of the problem that we're trying to solve, is like, here, other news consumers have read this article before you. Here's what they have to say about it. The part of the problem that you guys are solving, which is also huge and very widespread opportunity for you guys at Readup, is this issue of, are people actually reading content before they try to engage in a conversation about it? Which obviously applies, as we know, to like Twitter. Did you actually read all of the tweet or the tweets above your tweets before you dive into the conversation? Did you read whatever the source material is? So
I was just going to say, or the article itself, that so many Twitter threads start with an article and then you look below and it's just it's absolute nonsense. But yeah, these are huge problems.
There's a lot of headline skimming nowadays, and there's good reasons for it. Partly because the headline tries to tell you a lot about what's going to be in the article, but also because people are a lot of times dissatisfied with these news reports, and they don't think that reading news is really worth their time anymore. But at the same time, cable news is dying, and so news consumption has to happen somewhere. So tell us about the technology that underlies Readup.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for it's a great layup, basically. everything that we are doing is about complete reading, finishing articles. Readup doesn't exist if we don't actually know who's read what. So if you and I are going to have a conversation about an article, and let's say it's something by George Packer in the Atlantic, and it's a 60-minute article. If you look at it and spend, 5 minutes, maybe you get through the first couple of paragraphs or something like that, and I read the whole thing and we try to have a conversation, there's something that doesn't work about that. And that's why book clubs exist. That's why article clubs exist. That's why the number one thing about being an English major in college is like verifiability. The professors bring everyone into a room and it's like, who actually read, War and Peace? And they ask you questions to make sure that you can prove that you read it. And that's pretty much it. Like the reading does its own work. The reading itself is the exercise. So like going back to the origin of Readup, that was that spark that I told you about, which is people who aren't reading articles are ruining the conversations for everyone else. And so my co-founder basically began what we thought would be like a 3 or 4 month journey. I think it ended up being like 6 months to a year before we had any public product at all. We were just like, behind the scenes, not even stealth mode, because we were talking to everyone we could, but like, we were just like literally developing the actual the technology itself. And cool update on that. We basically officially, I'm still waiting to like put the certificate on the wall. But after like 3.5 years of a provisional patent and then going back and forth with the USPTO, we just got approved. And so we now have patented this technology. And as you might imagine, it's relatively complex. I'm happy to share like 14 pages worth of schematics with you, but it essentially takes any article from anywhere on the internet and first puts it through this process so that we can determine what is the article, what's an ad, what's not, and what is the meat of this thing. And then we use various inputs. The most obvious ones that you could guess are scroll speed and time spent on the page. But it's kind, it's basically a robot or something that can determine Chase read it, Bill didn't, or the other way around, whatever it is. And and the way that Readup works is that act of reading is your entry into absolutely everything on the platform. So you can't join a conversation unless you read an article. You can't even really do anything on the platform until you first read an article. I just spent like a half a day on Twitter yesterday. I'm like a strict abstainer from all forms of social media. And I've been for like the better part of a decade now, actually. And spending a little bit of time on Twitter because we're working on a Twitter integration and we're starting to do marketing for Readup. And, I hope to talk about like literally what we're working on this week right now. But it was like shocking to me, man, what's going on there. I mean, I'm just so far removed from it that it doesn't like, I don't regularly have the opportunity to remind myself, oh, that's what we fixed. That's like, that is so crazy. My personal values are slow, deep, and real. And that I found that like, that makes all things in life better. And Twitter is so fast and so shallow and so fake. It's like, there's just like absolute noise. The noise level is through the roof. And the, that causes also like, I won't get into it, but like the nasty factor or the angry factor, whereas Readup is a slow, intentional community where we read articles and talk about them.
Okay, so just to kind of oversimplify it for listeners who are going to go check out readup.com after this conversation.
Yes, of course.
There's a little technology that works kind of behind the scenes as you start reading an article on Readup, and it basically is just tracking not necessarily your eye movement, but kind of your page scroll and the time it looks like you're taking to move down through the article. And I'm guessing that you could, if you really wanted to, you could trick the bot by just simply opening the page and like scrolling at a certain pace. But again, that's introducing an enormous amount of friction where you might as well just read the article. And so,
totally.
So the value prop for Readup is for Readup users, I should say, is that
we don't have users, we have readers.
Readers, that's right.
It's a very important distinction. And when I left Silicon Valley, I had a lot of problems with the culture and the community there. And a lot of it has to do with language. I'm a word guy. I think that the way that we talk about our communities is really important. And I also think a lot about addiction. And I think technology is addictive. And this was like a year ago now, but almost a year ago, I was having a conversation with the rest of the Readup team and was like, yeah, this doesn't feel right at all. They're not users, they're human beings. Readup's not overrun with bots and fake stuff. These are real people having real experiences. So apologies for the correction, but I try to remind people we don't have users on Readup, we have readers.
Okay, and so for the readers on Readup, the value proposition to them is that, hey, this is basically like a book club where you've confirmed that everybody who's about to talk has read the book. So when you do engage in comments, there might be fewer comments on this article than you would find on Twitter, but totally. You know that it's not a bot, and you also know that the other human beings who are commenting have actually read the content, and so you can engage more deeply.
So exactly. And there's like so many little subtle things in there that we could have an entire design session and talk through all of it. But it completely changes the entire conversation. As a comment maker, so as a comment reader, I know that every single person in all of those comments, I don't have to like go in with my skepticism and be like, did Jessica read this? Or did Thor read this? Or, I just go in there and I know that everyone read it. And that's a crazy different kind of realm to be in. Even if you're not reading that individual article, you can get a summary or a take or something like that from someone who actually read it. Then on the flip side, there's actually the commenting experience. And when you know that you're not just going to get like a quick reply from someone who didn't read the article, you can be way more honest. You can be way more vulnerable. I've had these moments where I'm like, do I want to say this right now? Commenting is a crazy emotional thing. Just using the internet is a crazy emotional thing. And I feel like Readup does a lot of work to basically say, we treat each other well around here. And we don't have to enforce that. The reading mechanism does it for us. So exactly as you said, conversations are deeper, more interesting, and the quality is significantly greater. Even if, under a given article, there's only 2 or 4 comments or something like that, they're all worth reading and worth engaging with.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that Readup and Credder.com get out of kind of our slightly different mechanism of engaging with articles is that we're allowing for nuance. And This is with readup.com. If you know that somebody's read the article front to end, you can talk about things that you like or disliked about the article, and you can speak more freely with the nuance that other people have also read the entire piece and also have that nuance. So I think that nuance is a thing that's been lacking in digital conversations across all social media. And
wait, let me double down on that. Don't you think the world itself is missing nuance right now?
Well, I think,
or am I just imagining it? Like I become frightened on a day-to-day basis when I see that people's instinct to jump into their binary position, I'm left, I'm right, I think this, I think that, like, there's just like every single conversation, no matter what it's about, guns, immigration, abortion, Black Lives Matter, taxes, anything political, there's just like people go to default positions. And I have, especially in, the world post-COVID, I have found that my life is so much more interesting, and the people that I want to spend time with are not really interested in winning arguments, proving their point, as much as acknowledging what's actually going on right now, which is that we're all in a pretty big soup of profound chaos right now. This is where I have to like, don't be like a dystopian post-apocalyptic crazy person while you're talking to Chase today. But like, I really do believe that if we can't figure out how to start having conversations again, I lived out of my truck on the road for like 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And it was crazy. At that time, I just felt like I really understood like middle America, Trump supporters. I like to think that I've always been open-minded, but a lot of my like personal journey of the last several years has just been, I gotta like not be so sure about myself anymore. Cause it's not only is it not a good look, but it's like really sending society over the edge. And it just doesn't seem, like a meaning. For example, yesterday I got on Twitter again, and I just saw a bunch of stuff that I was like, I'm so glad I don't deal with this crap. But like, people are literally arguing over the insurrection still. What do we call it? Like, how do we do? And I was just like, I know what you guys all think. Like, that's not a fun conversation at all. I mean, if I was, and that's the problem with Twitter, going on there and looking for something interesting and realizing there's no nuance here. There's no and Readup is the exact opposite. There's always nuance. There's always a preliminary meditation of some kind. And that's why you won't see comments on Readup that are just like pro con or whatever. I mean, sometimes stuff is cut and dry. And in that case, maybe that is the nuance or whatever. But yeah, this is crazy. And you mentioned that this is what's happening in the digital world, but dude, this is life itself. I mean, this is like, now it's like playing out in the real world, and it's not good. And social media is doing it to us. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything is black and white these days. It's left versus right. People fall right into their tribal talking points, and nuance and depth is what's being left behind. And obviously, with what you're doing and with what we're trying to do, we are trying to make the claim that nuance and depth in our online conversations has value and is important. And I know that both of us have kind of struggled, at least in the early days. We're both, very excited and have a lot more momentum behind us these days. But in the early days, we were really struggling to try to pitch to like investors or the Silicon Valley type community that traditionally funds a platform like both of ours, that nuance and depth has value, is needed to fix the internet, and is an eventuality. It is inevitable on some degree.
And also that we have power, like that as technologists, we have this crazy power to reckon with, which is that we're changing the behavior of humanity. Like, WTF, man, that's like a serious thing to think a lot about. A few years ago, you're talking about like the early days and like trying to like be relevant. I had an investor tell me in front of a room full of people, and I don't think that she thought it was an embarrassing thing to say. And I was mortified. Like, I just thought, am I really hearing this right now? That like what Readup's trying to do is actually change people's behavior rather than see a trend and like capitalize on it, and she's like, if people don't want to read, or, like if this is basically just saying like if you're actually trying to change the way that people behave, you won't be able to do it, frankly. And I just remember thinking, if there's not going to be some, brave entrepreneurs who are going to try to figure out how to get people to change their behavior, what are we doing all the time? Like, are we literally just chasing money, or just trying like is there actually some higher calling to building technology at all? Or is that just like, am I, living a myth because I want to see that kind of world? I told you, that's why I love talking to you, because like, we're not a huge group of people, but there are some of us who actually are looking at problems and trying to think of how to solve them on a very human level. And that's what I refer to as humane technology, thinking about the person, thinking about what's best for them, and then trying to build something that brings out the best in them, rather than just what do they want or what are they asking for. And I've been I think sometimes I'm not sure if I'm like an optimist or a pessimist, or like, if I'm feeling good about things or not. It's hard work that we're doing, and it's a really messy industry. Journalism is like, dead on the rack right now. It's a weird time to be doing the type of work that we're doing. But my like deepest fundamental sense of optimism comes from hearing from people that they actually do want what we're building, and that they know that it's hard they know that reading is challenging, the same way that, it's not easy to go for a long run or like eat the right food. Like in life, sometimes doing the right thing takes work and perseverance and discipline. Those are the things that are worth doing. And technology right now, the entire industry is doing the exact opposite. It makes me totally crazy, literally capitalizing on our weaknesses. And that is just, it's no surprise that the world looks the way it does right now, because again, to me, it's like the way we are and the way we're behaving and what social media does to us, it's just like a direct line.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's very hard, if not impossible, for a platform like Readup or Credder to measure the value in these deeper conversations, whereas these investors like the one you referenced, they know exactly how to measure or the value of a social media platform based on the number of users, likes, clicks, comments, those types of things. And so, yeah, we're not trying to compete in that world, although we are competing in that world. And that's the challenge. And I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit of, about kind of maybe some of the early challenges or struggles to get Readup to where it is today.
It's growth, man. Growth. It's hard work, and especially with no budget at all. So, and especially not using social media to grow your bit, like really trying to stick to our values and grow in a way that's humane. We didn't even have any kind of push notifications until like a year and a half ago or something like that. And it's just because, and this is unusual for, a team to be this focused on what's good instead of what will make us big. And it's just very natural for us, because that's how we are and how we operate. But it has been really, really hard, not only to get people into the platform and using it, but then to get it to pick up steam and grow. And that's why what we're doing right now is so exciting. I mean, at the beginning, well, I'll also just add one more thing, is like, we're engaged in not only like educating people about Readup, but also educating people about the problem itself. And there's like a very cruel irony here, which is we're like, not really present on social media. And either way, it's a very nuanced conversation. We can work through it together right now because we're talking on, live for like a full hour. But as far as like just giving an elevator pitch to people, it's really challenging to say like, you don't know this, but you're not reading. You're like just wasting your time in a headline video game that's using you. People are, it's coming along. And the work of the Center for Humane Technology, that movie, The Social Dilemma. There's a lot of things like this that just like, I'm sure you experienced it at Credder too, just like, whoa, like we're more relevant now. Like people get this, like we don't have to explain this necessarily. We can like get even deeper and get, more exposure to this problem. But right now, I think people everyone knows social media is a complete dumpster fire. That's not like, that's just, I mean, that conversations, we've been having that for like 4, 5, 6 years at this point. I know that like 8, 9 years ago, it was like social media is the coolest thing ever. It's changing the world. It's making the world so great. Like people like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg were literally heroes. And now the coin has completely flipped and it's just like taken for granted. Oh yeah, all that stuff is a total nightmare. But so the next question is, so what do we do about it? And that's what I think you and I and a very small group of people are taking a huge risk, dedicating our entire lives to this thing. And it's important. I enjoy the work, like sometimes there are definitely times that are really challenging. I mean, especially this last year has been like a roller coaster it's like hard for me to just describe because, like month over month, just like, oh my God, we're going to be huge. There are, like, this is like actually really happening. And then, oh my God, it's game over, like just getting rocked back and forth. And I think a really important thing is for us to just persevere and really believe in what we're doing and know that I refuse to accept that 5 years from now, there's not going to be a better sense of digital media health, like digital, it's people are talking about digital literacy or news literacy or how like screen time, for example, is a new conversation, but really just like nailing that in and going further and further and further to say that, there are these destructive things that happen. Here's how you can get around it. And boom, 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 boom. I'm really convinced that, a 20-year-old in 2027 is just going to totally know I use the internet and I don't read, or I use the internet and I read. And even if that's as long as that's the case, we're at least in a position where people can make a good decision about that. And I'm certain people are going to read. You can't survive without, like engaging with reading the world. It's one of the most fundamental ways that people connect with each other.
Yeah. And one of those challenges that I know you've been facing over the last 6 months or so, and this was actually why we were waiting to get you on the podcast, was that Readup has been working on their subscription model, which is how you're going to monetize the platform, how you've been monetizing the platform, I should say, over the last month and a half, I believe. So this kind of uses your technology of you being able to track how much time and scroll that a reader has on a particular article. But go ahead, tell us now what that model is.
Yeah, totally. So Readup's not free to use. You have to pay to read on Readup. And this is completely distinct from the way that every other social platform, and I can go right through the list: Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, all the little spin-offs, these are all free to use. Because of that, you get used. The customer is the advertiser. My co-founder and I actually were in a really tough position, personally, financial, like everything was just like a mess last summer, basically. I flew back to New Jersey and we were like 4.5 years in, and we both just agreed, let's just like completely throw the product roadmap away and just jump like 10 steps ahead. It's like that, when you get like a lucky opportunity in chess and you're just like, whoa, like we can just go checkmate right now. Like, let's just like do this little thing. And we realized, let's start charging people to use Readup, and we can give that money to the writers and cut advertisers out of this internet platform. This is an advertising free future for social media, basically. Now, it was extremely risky for us to do that because it meant that we had to basically tell a bunch of people who are using the product for free, opt in to start paying, and then go to market to the rest of the world and say, Readup's not free. I'm sure you know that, like, making people pay, and our pricing structure is choose your own price. I can tell you more details about the actual business model. But the main thing is, it's almost like shockingly simple, but the internet's a nightmare because advertisers run it all. We're undoing all of that. Readers pay to read, writers get paid, and advertisers have nothing to do with it. This is like revolutionary stuff. And like I said, I'm just in this moment of like strange confidence right now, but I'm certain that this is the future for millions of readers all around the world. I used to think that we're just going to like knock Twitter out of the water. Now I think it's going to be more like, we're just going to take a very meaningful chunk away from Facebook, away from Twitter, and away from Reddit. And they're just going to be that subset of people on each of those platforms who just want to have deeper and more meaningful conversation, rather than just go, play those video games. And those people are willing to pay for it.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into the model, and let me go ahead and try to explain how I see this revenue model working. So basically, a reader pays a subscription, a monthly fee of their choosing. I think the minimum is $5. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so the minimum's $5. Let's say I pay $10 and I read 10 articles. My payment of $10 that month is distributed based on how much time I spent on each of those 10 articles. And so what Readup is doing is behind the scenes, without me having to tip individual articles or authors, you're basically saying, we're taking your subscription amount, that $10, 5% of it is for us for managing this platform, and 95% of it is going to be distributed based on the amount of time you spent on each reader's article. And then Readup is going to do the legwork of filling up those accounts and reaching out to those journalists so that they can come and claim their whatever it is. Maybe now it's about 10, 20, 30, $40 a month in subscription revenue for those readers. But Readup manages all of that behind the scenes. All you have to do is pick your amount and read.
Yep. Yes. If this was an assignment, you get like an A- on that whole thing. It was like literally close to perfect. The one thing is that it's not based purely on time spent. It's just the length of the article. So, even if you like spend all day reading and rereading and rereading and rereading one particular article, but you're right that it is divvied up based on the length of the article. So a $10 subscription, you read 10 articles. If all of the articles are equal length, then everyone gets $1 or slightly less than $1 because Readup takes 5%. But yeah, what we found is that it's way too much cognitive like overhead to try to figure out like tipping writers or something like that, to have to like make the decision about, I want to give this writer from the New Yorker this much, but like this blogger is probably really like struggling and could use the money more, or like something like that. There's just like so much to think about, and we don't want any readers to be distracted from anything except just focusing on the reading. One way that I simplify it for people is that it's Spotify for reading, but completely transparent. So you can read anything from, if you prefer to read, magazines versus newspapers, you can enjoy Vanity Fair and GQ and The Economist on Readup. And then at the end of the month, our subscription cycle is monthly. So you can always choose to like upgrade and pay more. And by the way, we found that a lot of readers are doing exactly that. They're like, they get through after a month and they paid $10 and they read 20 or 30 great articles. And they have that moment of being like, I'm giving all of these writers 50 cents, 75 cents or something like that. And then they're like, I'm going to bump this up to like 40 or 50. So that way, like wherever people end up is exactly what they can budget for reading. And then you can see it totally transparently.
So let me jump in here. So if I read one of those 10 articles, I'm the $10 subscriber. I read 10 articles, but one of them I just think is trash. It's terrible. And I don't want, even though I spent time on it, I don't want my subscription money going to that person. Is there kind of a check at the end where I can confirm or maybe pull it away, or is it all automatic?
There is not. And I have to ask you a question. Why would you read something that you don't like or where you don't want to say?
Sometimes you don't know that it was a bad article till you're done reading it, and you just feel, horrible at the end of it, like you were tricked into reading it by the headline.
Totally. Well, what you can do on Readup is give it after you're done reading, and only if you finish the reading, you can score an article on a scale of 1 to 10. It's actually kind of like one of our features that like edges on competitive with Credder. But far and away, the most common experience is if you're reading something and you find it not to be to your liking, you abandon it. And that's it's like downvoting something, like it's the equivalent thing. So the answer is, if the writer writes something that you stick with to the end, they get paid, whether you like it or not.
Okay.
Maybe we'll change that. If it's a feature request, I appreciate it, but no one has asked for it yet. And it's one of those like not really feature requests that comes up in conversation all the time, but no one has specifically said, I want this because I read a lot of stuff I don't want to compensate or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I can imagine, and I don't see you guys doing this, but I could imagine a world where right before you get to the last 2 sentences of the article, Readup says, and by the way, if you don't want to pay this writer, bounce now.
Stop now.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
but I mean, the overwhelming experience is the exact opposite, which is that at the end of the month, you look back at the stuff you read. It's often quite surprising that you didn't read as many articles as you thought you read. And it's, you realize I have to, actually focus. That was one of the aha moments for me, by the way, about a year or two into building this thing. We had the Chrome extension, we had the civil discourse thing going on, but I had it just running permanently, like on my machine all the time. We don't do that because that's a massive invasion of privacy. Now you have to like import articles into Readup, but I had this thing just running on my full machine all the time. And I told you before, I'm an English major. I'm obsessed with reading. I have this view of myself as this very, literary person who uses the internet in an intelligent way. And I was like, holy crap, I read like 2 articles this week, like 4-minute long articles. And that was out of sync with what I thought was, my own reality. But yeah, it's always been a really positive experience to actually read. And now for the first time ever, as of literally just more than a month, the first billing cycle has closed now. Not only do you get the warm and fuzzies of reading, which is so beautiful, but you look back and you know that you're contributing to the future of the journalism industry, and not in an abstract way. It's not like giving money to the Knight Foundation or something like that. Not that I don't support like all kinds of philanthropic efforts. First and foremost, the best thing that you can do for the journalism industry is just actually read. And that's why we did what we did. That's also the number one thing that writers want. I'm convinced that even without the business model, which is like a game-changing slam dunk for us, it's still just a big deal to show writers, look, this is a place where people are actually going to read you instead of just, all the other noise. And I, as someone who's written a lot in the past, a blog and essays and things like that, even if I just get like 5 writers or something, 5 readers on something that took me days to write and it's 10 minutes long to read, when that counter clicks up, I'm just like, yes, like it's an analytic that actually really matters to me. I know someone sit and their brain touched my brain, like it's just like a meaningful thing. Now, for the first time ever in the history of the company, and the history of the internet, frankly, not only do you just get to read, focus on reading, ad-free, distraction-free, the whole thing works, but you get the double warm and fuzzy of having put some money in the writer's pocket. And that's a crazy thing. It's all very natural. It's very above board. Like it feels good the same way that like putting $1 in the hat of like someone who's strumming the guitar on the side of the road or something, like there's actually the depth of engagement involves a financial interaction, and it's bigger than just the financial interaction, but that's a major part of it and something that we're super proud of. And it's just causing this like really exciting explosion of energy for us and our community. And we're really excited about what the next couple of months are going to be like.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited for you guys too. I love how it's just integrated into the reader experience. Sorry, how it's just integrated into the reader experience. At Credder, we've done something, I wouldn't even call it similar, but we've tried to give money to journalists before. What we do at the end of every year is we do what we call the Credder Holiday Bonus, where we take the 5 top rated journalists of the year of that previous 12-month period, and we pay them out $1,000 each. And I was actually going to ask, we actually struggled even to get in touch with some of these journalists to give them $1,000. So I'm curious what it's like for you guys.
Oh my God. And you are giving away $1,000.
$1,000, and we still couldn't get certain journalists to like actually respond to us.
Are you willing to tell me who you got and who you, and I also just want to know who are the top writers on Credder? I'm sure we have some overlap.
Yeah. Some of the top ones are Ed Yong, who actually just won a Pulitzer. So that was a great kind of confirmation that our system is working as well.
Did you have like Glenn Greenwald, or was it like political writers, or like the Arthur Brooks and like opinion writers from the New Yorker and stuff like that?
It's kind of a mix. I'll have to send the last year's winners to you because now we're halfway through or so this new year. But it was people like Ed Yong, Jason Del Rey at Recode. Taylor Lorenz won actually for the New York Times. It's kind of a good mix, some science writers in there as well. But anyway, I'm curious how the reaching out to journalists to come claim their what is even smaller amounts, at least at the time being, what that reaching out to them and actually getting them to try to claim their money is like.
Totally. And we're literally just getting started in doing exactly that. And this is getting to like literally like our I would say like current challenge, basically. We have, after our first month, 75 writers, actually, I think it's 76 writers who have surpassed the $10 minimum in order to cash out. And we are literally just beginning to cash out the very first writers. Jeff and I cashed ourselves out to make sure the thing works a few days ago. We have like I guess a dozen writers that we're already connected to. And, they're like part of our, like they answer my text messages and phone calls no matter what, because they love Readup and believe in Readup. But honestly, it's a big question mark right now. I don't have a good answer for you. That's like, we can say that writers are enthusiastic about getting on board with this thing. What I will say, though, is that for the first time ever, we actually have an incentive for writers to join and get involved. And the other thing that's really like just, I think, significant, we only have a few hundred. I mean, if you're measuring like active readers on our platform and paying active readers, we have a big group of what I think of as a big group, but it's actually very small. Like when you're talking about a few hundred people who are paying into something, and the fact that on the other end of that marketplace, less than 100 people are able to cash out, the unit economics is what's exciting, not the absolute value. So from our perspective, someone like Ben Thompson or Jill Lepore, I know that they're like number 1 and number 2 on Readup right now. Ben Thompson is an extremely prolific blogger. I'm hoping that over the course of the next few days, he's going to respond to some of my emails. Jill Lepore is totally different. I'm not sure if she's been nominated for a Pulitzer or 2 or National Magazine Award or something, but she's like so prolific. And so many of her stories have like, I can think of specific ones that just like rocked my existence. I don't know if they're going to like get really psyched about $45, but what I think is going to be really interesting is we now have like this little tiny seed of a thing, and we can show it to them and say, this is happening for real. Like this ball is now rolling, and without getting too like salesy about it, what I'm trying to like get out there to these writers is there's going to be a huge first mover advantage, the same way that there is on any social platform. So I read something earlier today. I think it was Craig Newmark actually, like a tweet or something from somewhere about how, like if you go to Substack, basically, you have to already have a big crowd in order to like be big on Substack. The really exciting thing about Readup is we have the Jill Lepores and Ben Thompson, but we also have several writers who've broken the $10 barrier, and they're like, ready to take off basically. And they're like very small writers, like I don't want to, I hate to imply that like their writing or their like, influence is lower because they don't have thousands of followers on Twitter, or I guess hundreds of thousands, whatever, like millions of followers on Twitter. But this is like an open platform. Anyone can get in, get on, start making money. And that's a game-changing thing. But we'll see. I will update. It's probably a good topic for my next company-wide email, which is just like, are writers even going to cash out on this thing? But yeah, we just finished it up. Our initial plan was actually just to pay people with like PayPal and Venmo. I mean, we set all of the money aside internally, and then we just have this like ruthless machinery of being like, yo, we have money for you. We have money for you. Plug in, get verified, and start interacting with the community, and you'll watch your rank go up. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're doing at Credder is this licensing model where we're licensing the ratings to third-party platforms like content platforms, social media, search engines, to allow them to prioritize credible content in their own news feeds and search results and things like that. And I've always kind of talked to you about your technology and how I think it could very easily be licensed to other platforms, especially now that you have your patent approved. Congratulations, that's huge. So what's interesting to me about this new revenue model is that I've kind of always told you that I think just the being able to confirm that somebody read the content before engaging is a licensable technology to other platforms. But now I think that what you're doing, where you're tracking a reader's attention and time and engagement, and then determining a payout based on that, I think that also could be seen as its own standalone technology that could be licensed.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
If Twitter, for example, did Twitter Blue, and they started, or Facebook did Facebook Blue, whatever, and it's their $10 a month subscription where they say, okay, we're no longer showing you advertisements, and we're going to send a piece of your $10 to the content creators that you spend the most time on. They're going to need to build out that technology, and maybe that's another piece that you can license, or maybe it's another piece that you can actually patent.
I would be happy if these things happened, but I'm just not waiting for these companies to get better anymore. It's that really, if I have to say like the main source of like frustration for me over the course of the last decade is, and this also comes to like a little bit of a quirky feeling that I have about the Center for Humane Technology in general, is like, we got to stop looking at these guys to improve what they're doing. It's what the way that they exist, their fundamental, not only the way that their products function, but their value systems. And they could make these changes if they want to. They don't want to. They won't make as much money if they do. And that's why, we can sit around waiting for Facebook to have it. I remember, right. And I actually like looked back at my old, personal writings and like emails that I was trading with people 5 to 10 years ago, thinking, why doesn't Facebook have a premium option where I can opt out of ads? Like, and that's not like an advanced like product strategist. That was just me as a consumer, like me just being like, damn, I'd pay these people if they just like, if it wasn't so freaking addicting all the time. Like I still like, and at that time I was using Fit. Now I boycott all this. Like, it's just a nightmare. I don't do it anymore because it made me really unhappy. And it was just not a good situation. But yeah, they have the power to introduce these changes, and they choose not to. I mean, and we saw this play out throughout the election. I mean, I can think of like specific examples. I'm sure you can too, where it's like, wow, they really totally had the power to make this better. But the thing is, people forget this. You think that those companies are news businesses, or that they have any like even remote distant care about making sure that people are informed. we all need to resist that feeling like that. They're not doing that. It's the same way that we look at oil companies and they have like, like a green campaign or something like that. It's like you're an oil company. That's like and that, by the way, I'm not trying to make a judgment. We all drive vehicles and stuff like that. I'm just saying, like, there's like a level of doublespeak / fake news / whatever you want to call it, where you can get mixed up and where suddenly you forget that's not, like, things are not as they seem. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, to use a Hamlet quote. Like, this is just like a little weird. And when you, like, for me at least, once that clicked, when I was like, they don't have my best interest in mind, and they have no desire to build tools that enhance my experience of navigating the internet. They want me spending more time looking at ads, period. That's it. Like, we just, and I feel like, again, there's like this conversation is moving now at this point, like, that was a pretty radical thing for me to say a few years ago. Now it's like, there's just like book after book after book, and like researcher after like every single like top university has like experts in their digital and communications and tech department who are like looking at this thing. So it's finally getting the credibility that it deserves. And now we're slowly starting to see solutions to these problems. But yeah, I mean, I was also, I like, my co-founder and I had a really interesting conversation. He was like driving me to the airport, and just days after we launched our business model, and it was like undeniably successful. When we hit go, we had no idea what was going to happen. It was probably easily the biggest risk of my entire career. We hit go, it worked. People started buying in, everything. We were like, oh my God, okay, we're good. He drove me to the airport, and like, I had just earlier that day gotten the news that Twitter bought Scroll. So we talked about it for like nonstop. Like, what does this mean for us? Because Scroll was one of these companies that we were watching, and we're like, they want this, they believe in this. They, like, I felt pretty like excited about it. And then it's like, they got bought by Twitter. I'm not holding my breath. I mean, it'd be cool. Like, I will sleep perfectly fine in a year if the internet works for readers and writers. But again, I feel like I'm kind of like kicking a dead horse here. You and I know what's actually going down. People like us need to actually just go and do it, because if we put our faith in these companies, we are so screwed. We've seen that. We know what's happening right now. So that's where my head's at, basically. But yeah, hopefully Twitter does something. I mean, Twitter Blue is coming along. I'm going to be like so psyched to see what it is. But is it going to like solve this problem the way we're solving it? No way. I mean, it's like, I don't have time to like get too hung up in competition, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of hope, though, to the point that you're kind of getting at, which is that the public consciousness is finally starting to come around to products like ours, and coming around to this way of thinking where we don't need to spend the first, 2 sections of a landing page explaining the problem. We can be like, that news is clickbait and sensational these days, and here's what you can do about it. We don't need to spend the majority of the time explaining the problem. So I think that there's a lot of a lot of momentum in our direction.
The really important or exciting thing to me about public consciousness on these topics is that it's a lot more than just social media is bad, advertisers are bad. It actually requires like longer conversations about many things that I think we've always had a superficial understanding of. But the things that I'm excited that I'm hearing people talking about now are like transparency with algorithms, or moderation and curation. Like, how do we actually find the content? What does like article discovery mean? Like 5 or 10 years ago, you just saw stuff on Drudge Report or Huffington Post, or you read the New York Times or whatever. Now we need much deeper, collective consciousness on this stuff. And I'm seeing it for sure. It starts with anger about social media, and then it turns into like, well, what do I want to do? And then it turns into, I have to learn how to do that. I have to think, I have to figure out, and I have to make intentional decisions about my own personal media diet and how I want to live and how I want to engage with the world. And not to like pat myself on the back, because it's more of just like a weird quirk of my personality than anything else. But I've been doing that for a really long time. And so has the rest of the team at Readup and our community. We've been like really trying to think about our own personal media consumption habits for a long time. Now we're seeing that that's just a common thing. Like, I talk to like people across all like, backgrounds, and like here I live in rural New Mexico, and I've had these conversations with my neighbors who are like barely online anymore, and they're talking about like how you have to be careful about like what you find, like how you find news and what you believe and stuff like that. And it's like, that's good. That's progress. We're like definitely getting somewhere. This conversation is moving.
Yeah. And so what's coming up next for Readup? Obviously, you've kind of had these different phases of the company. Phase one is anger, frustration, and start building. Phase two is getting early readers on the platform and kind of identifying what that great reading experience is. And phase three is probably can be defined as this kind of monetization model. Now, what's coming next? What's the next big phase?
Getting rich and famous or something like that. I don't know. But to be really honest, it's like kind of it's a little bit of a head trip or an ego trip, or like literally just wrangling with the fact that this thing is going to be totally huge. And for a long time, I didn't know, like, I feel like my co-founder and I are very like high empathy, high, like comfortable with vulnerability, and like overall with this project, I don't want to say low confidence as though it's a bad thing, but just like more focused on our curiosity and not necessarily like knowing for sure how we're going to get there. Now, literally today, June 17th, I'm like looking at my calendar and figuring this out and being like, we're going to have millions of people doing this. It's happening. This is like this. And especially now that we have a marketplace, and even saying it out loud to you and being like, readers pay to read online and writers get paid and there are no advertisers. It's just like, this is happening for sure. And so we're just trying to stay true to who we are and trying to stay, like we now have, this is like a very soft pre-announcement, but like, it's crazy exciting to be hiring employees, and it's great. Like just thinking about what it might be like to have a team of like, will probably, I think, be 10 or 20 people before the end of the year, and maybe a couple hundred employees next year. You know how this goes. Like when the thing happens, and it's, our job. And my co-founder and I are 50-50 on this thing. And, or at least, as we bring new people in, we have smaller shares of ownership. But as far as like leadership goes, we really do, share in the highest level decision making for the company. And right now we're just like almost in like responsive mode, which is just like the thing has a thing that it wants to be. We're just listening and manifesting it and staying true to what we're all about, focusing on our 3 core values and just really like, living it day in and day out. Is that a really cop out of an answer?
No,
but
no,
it's true. I mean, we didn't get into this for money, and it's like I like really feel strongly like these next few months specifically are going to be a time when, when you're toiling in obscurity, it's very easy to have like ambitions and to talk a big game about like the guys in charge are doing this and it should be like this. Then when all of a sudden I'm now sending emails to thousands of people, and I have a platform that people are using it and looking at a screen. And as someone that has like a really like complicated history with screen time, when I think about that, I feel a huge obligation to do this correctly. And I feel like the bar is so insert expletive low right now that really like you can just kind of like build anything that's better than what we have. And that's true. Incremental progress is great. But that's not the kind of company that I want to build. And that's not the kind of team that we have. We're not thinking about like how to like make something that's a little bit better. We have a huge and important thing that we need to do, which is make the internet work for people and for the world. And we're not resting until this thing is really scaled and hits in a global way.
And what are some of those first hires that Readup is going to be looking for? Going to be like, are we talking about management, more developers, designers? What are some of those?
It's a great question. So I think one of the things that has been challenging about Readup is because it's a very ambitious company with a pretty complex product, like it has a lot of different features and capabilities and things like that. And my co-founder and I are not UI or UX experts by any means. So we're very eager to just kind of have like a tightening up of the entire like onboarding experience, and a lot of stuff that just has to do with like the meat and potatoes of the thing is working really well. But as it just gets even more kind of polished, people talk about it more, it just like makes more sense. So we're definitely interested in hiring for like those capabilities, I guess. But yeah, we obviously, of course, need developers. I mean, that's by far, like, I think we'll probably hire 2 or 3 like capable programmers for every one non-capable programmer. By the way, I like can mess around in the stuff, but I totally know how valuable it is. And it's taken me a long time to just be able to like actually interact in the code. But we're also fundraising soon, and so like we need a ton of different skill sets on the team. Fundraising for me is just so bizarrely confusing because I don't know, venture capital is this world that feels very foreign to me, and so I would love to have a person on the team who can help me out with that and just sort of like make all of that stuff make sense. But yeah, we're gonna need everything, and we're gonna also. I know like every small company always says this, like a very flexible approach to hiring and also organizational structure. But one of my favorite things about working on Readup is that we do the work that we care about and that we want to do. And I've always worked at organizations where like if you're a developer, you're a developer. If you're a marketer, you're a marketer. Whereas there's a new progressive model emerging in which maybe you're a marketer, but you want to try writing code for 6 months, or maybe you're a developer and you really want to have a chance to like sit on like marketing stuff for a couple of months. We're going to have the kind of company where that's actually possible. So another conversation for another time, but I'm really enthusiastic about a flat organization where people can actually fulfill their purpose at work.
That's great. Why don't you give listeners, before we get into my last 2 questions that I ask every guest that comes on the podcast, why don't you give listeners some URLs, I guess not going to be any Twitter handles in your case, but some places that they can go to follow your work.
Yeah, totally. So the most important thing, and this is like a pitch, this is an ask. If you're watching this and you think some of this stuff sounds interesting, get on Readup and start paying for a subscription. Go to readup.com. Doesn't matter what device you're on, where you are. You can get the iPhone app is an amazing reading experience, but the browser extensions, if you're using a laptop or computer, are also great. It all starts at readup.com. And the only way to experience Readup is to pay in and then, actually see it all happening. So yeah, readup.com, readup.com, readup.com.
Great. All right, last 2 questions for you here. You've listened to some of the podcasts before, so you probably have an idea of what's coming. So,
yeah, totally.
Bitcoin, believer, skeptic, maybe you own a little. Where are we at on the Bitcoin philosophy?
Yeah, so Bitcoin completely changed my life, and I'm a huge believer. The only thing in the world that is a better investment than Bitcoin right now is Readup. And that's why I'm shifting. I have had 100% of my personal life savings in Bitcoin for like my entire adult life. And I have a really interesting like personal Bitcoin story, I guess, because and my co-founder is a part of this story too. I told you we've been like doing stuff, like technology hacker universe stuff for as long as we met in preschool, and we've like always been interested in this kind of stuff. So yeah, where we are right now is we're both just surviving off of a tiny little bit of savings that we have from having mined Bitcoin a really long time ago. And yeah, of course. I mean, I don't even know how to like respond to that question as though Bitcoin is not what the most important, one of the most important things happening right now. Huge believer. But yeah, don't play it, like don't try to like trade to win or whatever. And I also think that all other, I mean, I've seen and heard of a couple of other like crypto related, conversations or whatever that I find to be interesting, but I like couldn't care less about Ethereum and Dogecoin and all this other stuff. Bitcoin's the real deal, and that's where my head's at.
Yeah.
What about you? Are you a crypto fan, or
Yeah,
what's your
big
position?
big crypto believer, big fan. Fan of mostly Bitcoin,
Yeah,
for what it is and for how it opened up this entire decentralized finance world. Also
yeah,
a pretty big believer in Ethereum. And then my research and investigation kind of stops there. I'm kind of just waiting to see what
yeah,
else bubbles to the top in a meaningful way. But yeah, big believer in the crypto space. Decentralized finance is
yeah.
the future, and it's already upon us. And for someone like you, you are literally were able to found a company off of an early investment in Bitcoin. So I wish I'd gotten in when you got in. That would have been great.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a really a very positive and wild ride. I mean, my co-founder and I both like we live really frugally, and we have I guess like a different approach to company building, but it's just been so crazy. Like just when we're like running out of runway, like, and it happened this year. I personally had less than a half of a coin left, and was like, I was stressing out about signing a lease on a place that was $500 a month. And then, and I'm still, I mean, it's not like I'm like in the clear now. But then Bitcoin just went up another like 300% to, like it's like always like, oh my God, now like this just like all of a sudden I'm like kind of sort of okay. But yeah, it's been crazy, man, like a really wild ride.
Yeah. Speaking of wild rides,
Yeah.
next question has to do with this wild ride of life we're living. Are we living in a simulation?
I knew that question was coming and I didn't think of a good answer for it. Yes.
Yeah. Hard yes.
Yeah, I think I really do think it's a hard yes, but I think that there are mysteries that I can't understand, and I experience them in very strange ways at strange times. And I don't know how to describe it besides saying that's magical, or that's like literally incredible. Like this, there's lots of stuff. I mean, and there's some stuff that's like really obvious about it, like romantic chemistry, or like seeing something beautiful in nature and having like new clarity about the way the world works, basically. Having had what I would describe as those like, and everyone has them, like moments of like spiritual enlightenment, or like just those things that are just like, whoa, it all makes sense. That higher power or that higher organization, I do believe that there's operating going on up there, and that we're at some kind of lower level. I just don't know how to describe it. I don't have a vocabulary for it. I'm sure that I've science fiction has been really helpful in terms of actually like putting language to that. But yeah, the concept of a simulation, after I remember it being like this vague thing in college when I first like started thinking about what it might be like if like, we're actually just like autonomous, or like living like, and I do believe in free will, by the way. I don't think like my belief in free will does not conflict with this idea that I don't know, there might be like many simultaneous universes going on, or many simultaneous universal experiences going on, or that something about like the way that I'm living today is a mystery that I can't explain. And the simulation hypothesis is really productive and worth considering.
And so if this is a simulation, what do you want your legacy to be in the simulation? What do you want to leave behind?
Totally. Well, I can answer that question for like real life, because whether life is a simulation or not, we'll never actually know. And this is like something I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly before, or like maybe if I had a few drinks or something like that, or like in a moment of like profound clarity and vulnerability with another person. But I believe that I'm going to work with a relatively surprisingly small group of people, because that's how collaboration and technology works, to make the internet better for everyone. I think that there's, if Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey can like spin up companies that undeniably shift the future of humanity and the way in which humans interact with each other, and the way in which, like just all of society functions, I actually think that I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that if I work for my entire life as hard as I possibly can on this project and with a very deep belief in the power of reading. I didn't invent reading. I didn't invent writing. I didn't invent what it does to us to make us, see the world in a totally new way. The only thing that I did with a few people is like look at the internet, see the way that it destroys our reading brain, inhibits our ability to read, distracts us from reading, all of these different things. We're going to solve that problem for real at scale. And it's going to change the future of not just the future of the internet, but the future of humanity.
Yeah, I believe it, Bill. And I'm so excited with the work you're doing. I hope everyone listening goes. Yeah, I hope everyone listening goes and checks up readup.com. It's spelled just like you would think, readup.com. Links will be in the show notes. Bill, thanks so much for being here today. It's great to see you guys have success with that subscription model. I think that's going to be huge for your upcoming fundraising and then therefore your ability to grow the team and really scale. So totally. Best of luck to you, my friend. And everybody go check out readup.com.
Rock and roll. Thank you. Catch you later.
Thanks, Bill.